my name's Jessie and I'm the social media coordinator for Action on Postpartum Psychosis. I'm also a mother and I have lived experience of postpartum psychosis. Action on Postpartum Psychosis has been running a campaign to increase support for families affected by postpartum psychosis in Wales, building our volunteer network, training health professionals, and campaigning for specialist services and mother and baby unit. I'm here today to talk to Sally, to Ines and Sharon about support for those affected by postpartum psychosis in Wales.
Hello everybody, my name's Sally, so I'm APP's training coordinator, so I help to train health professionals across the UK in postpartum psychosis. My background is in research and lecturing in health and exercise sciences, and I live in North Wales, and I experienced postpartum psychosis after the birth of my daughter about 5 years ago now. So.
Hi, my name is Ines and I coordinate the APP peer support group in South Wales alongside two assistant coordinators and a group of volunteers. I'm originally from Spain and I moved to Swansea back in 2001, and I have had postpartum psychosis after the birth of my daughter in 2006.
Hello, I'm Sharon Fernandez. I'm the National Clinical Lead for Perinatal Mental Health in Wales. I started the role in January 2019, and before that I was working within the Health Visiting Service in Powys Teaching Health Board. I've always had a particular interest in supporting parents with mental health difficulties and was involved in shaping the work in Powys and nationally before starting this role.
So thank you for joining me, and I'll start by introducing the charity Action on Postpartum Psychosis. So APP is the national charity for women and families affected by postpartum psychosis, and we raise awareness, we campaign and deliver peer support. We facilitate research, for example, into the causes and the impacts of postpartum psychosis, and run training for health professionals, which are delivered by women with lived experience and by academics and clinical experts. So Sally, I was wondering if you could tell me a little about what postpartum psychosis is and your experience of postpartum psychosis.
Yeah, okay. So postpartum psychosis is a severe and frightening mental illness that can develop quite quickly after childbirth, and it can happen in about 1 to 2 in every 1,000 mums across the UK, and it should be treated really as a medical emergency. So women with pre-existing bipolar disorder are at a higher risk of postpartum psychosis, but many women who develop postpartum psychosis, it can just come out of the blue with no kind of previous mental illness as well. So in the early days, you might see things like quite rapid changes in mood. So that could be feeling quite high and a bit like supermum in those first few days, but can also flip to be feeling quite teary and sad and low at times. So it's about those kind of rapid changes in mood in those kind of first few days to weeks. And then some women find it quite hard to sleep, so they either can't sleep or don't feel the need to sleep, and that can make things a little bit worse as well. And then over time, people might start to develop paranoia or delusions and hallucinations. So that's when you kind of see things that aren't and hear things that aren't really there. So one of the main things that I felt when I started to develop postpartum psychosis was quite severe confusion. So I couldn't kind of work out what was going on. I'd just come round from delivering my daughter, and I didn't know where she'd come from. I couldn't quite work out what was happening, and I just couldn't make sense of what was going on really. And I knew there wasn't something quite right, but I just couldn't work out what it was. And then as time went on, I can only describe my sort of mind as racing. So lots of racing thoughts. My mind was very busy. It's like my brain wouldn't switch off really. And then that night I couldn't really sleep. So I just literally couldn't switch my mind off. So about 4 days after I gave birth, I started to kind of hear and see things that weren't really there. And I was kind of living in my own reality and 100% believed that those things were happening in real life. So at that point I was diagnosed with postpartum psychosis and admitted to a general psychiatric unit. And it took me quite a while to get the treatment that I needed for me, but once that happened, I kind of started to begin that recovery journey, really. So that's just a little bit about what postpartum psychosis is and my journey with it. So.
Thank you, Sally. And Ines, could you tell us a bit more about what you experienced after the birth of your daughter and how you got involved as a peer supporter for APP?
Yeah, after the birth of my daughter, like Sally, I experienced mania, being high more or less straight away within for 3 or 4 days after I had my daughter. So I remember feeling like really happy, having lots of energy, and being unable to sleep for days. So I ended up being admitted to the local psychiatric hospital because there was no mother and baby unit in Wales, and I couldn't get a place in one of the English mother and baby units. So I was admitted, and I was there for a week or so, and I was put on some medication. And then I was discharged, and then I suffered from some periods of depression for the next few months. And then within 6 months, then I had another episode of mania. So I was finally given the diagnosis of bipolar disorder, and I started on lithium. So it was around this time that of my recovery period that I heard of APP.
And Sharon, could you tell us a bit about the services in Wales, how they're set up to support women?
Yeah. So we're aware that experiencing mental illness after having a baby can be extremely difficult for all involved, and women and their families need to be supported throughout. So what's happened over the last few years is that specialist perinatal mental health teams have been set up across Wales, with all health boards being able to provide support and services for women who need it. The Specialist Perinatal Mental Health Service provides assessment and treatment for women who are experiencing or are at increased risk of experiencing a severe mental illness during pregnancy and up to the first year after birth. There's also preconceptual counselling, which is available for women who've experienced a severe mental illness previously and would like to plan a pregnancy. So staff within those specialist teams have the skills and knowledge to work with women and their families to make sure that they are receiving the right care and support for them. So during the last few months, teams have continued to provide those services. However, the way in which those services have been provided has changed. And it will depend very much on where you are in Wales and the care that you need as an individual. So some may still be receiving face-to-face contact, while others may receive support via the telephone or virtual platforms. The way it happens will be decided on the individual needs. But the message that we really would like to convey as a network is that services are still very much open. PP should always be treated as an emergency. Care is needed within hours or days of developing symptoms, and the illness can escalate rapidly.
And Sharon, so what would someone do if they are developing postpartum psychosis and if they're in urgent need of help?
If you need support immediately, you need to call 999 or go to A&E. You can also discuss how you're feeling with your midwife, your health visitor, and your GP, or call 111. If you've already been supported by mental health services, specialist teams, you can also contact them directly. You may find, however, that you become very unwell very quickly and may be too unwell to realise that you need support. So the responsibility for seeking that additional support and care will then be down to partners, families, health professionals to make sure that you get that right care at that time.
Thanks, Sharon. Yeah, that's certainly the case for me as well, that I was too poorly to know that I was unwell, and so it was my friends and family around me that helped me to get help. So I think that's a really good message. And Sally and Ines, could you tell us a bit about your recovery from postpartum psychosis here in Wales, how long it took and what helped you and what you needed during that time? So Sally, can I come to you first?
Yeah, okay. So it probably took me the best part of kind of 10 months to kind of get the treatment that I needed. So for me, obviously it's very individual, but lots of things weren't working for me. So in the end, I had electroconvulsive therapy or ECT treatment. And that actually saved my life, really, and it was a real turning point for me. So once the kind of psychosis and depression symptoms gradually disappeared after that treatment, that's where my kind of recovery started, I think. So it was those couple of years after. It took a long time to kind of work through everything that had happened. So, for example, just the shock of being so ill, and working through lots of different emotions, everything that's happened, all the kind of thoughts that you had when you were poorly. So it took a long time for me to kind of work through that. And I think, so I had an amazing clinical psychologist that I was able to talk through all that with and work out all the things, and things like fear of getting ill again and all my kind of relationship with my daughter and everything. So that was really helpful for me. And then I also found APP, and I was able to talk to another woman that had been through a really similar experience to me. And that just gave me hope, really, that I would get better and everything was going to be okay. So it probably did take me a long time to recover from postpartum psychosis, but I've come such a long way since I was poorly. And I think for me, getting that right treatment and support might have taken a little longer, just because when I was poorly there weren't necessarily specialist teams in Wales, but now so much has happened in the last 5 years since I was ill that all that kind of support is there, really. So it's an exciting time for perinatal mental health in Wales at the moment. So
I feel very much like Sally. It took me about a year to kind of get the medication right and get to a level where you were, trying to get over the shock and what happened to you, and kind of go back to some kind of normal life. But I agree with Sally. The one thing that I feel was missing for a start was perinatal mental health services. I remember just struggling when I was unwell, waiting for my next appointment with my psychiatrist, or maybe just to see I had a support worker. I think the gaps between appointments sometimes were too long for me, because I didn't have no therapy, how to cope with my feelings and stuff like that. I was placed on a waiting list to have CBT, but it was like a 2-year waiting list. So I was lost to follow up, and I never had treatment for that. So I feel like definitely like a peer support group would have definitely helped, because as soon as I met the mums a year later, and talk to them and share the stories, we kind of got a lot of help and tips, and you relate to what they've been through, and they know what you've been through, because obviously you've come from the same place. So with that, and also obviously the lack of a mother and baby unit, I feel quite strongly about that, because for me it was really traumatic to have to go into hospital not knowing what was happening to me, and then having to leave my daughter behind when I was breastfeeding her, and that was going really well. I then had to stop because obviously I had to go in and then go on medication. So I hopefully now with the better services locally, things will work out better for women with the same with postpartum psychosis.
Okay, so within Wales, the Perinatal Mental Health Network is focusing on making sure that the services that are being provided are offering high quality support and care based on the most up-to-date evidence, and that wherever you live in Wales, you'll be able to access the same services. There are still some slight differences in how those services are being provided across the different areas of Wales, but we are working closely with all the health boards to look at how we can sort that out, what staff are needed within the teams, who they support, and how that support is being offered. We're also working with midwives, health visitors, GPs, and colleagues in other mental health services to make sure that they are providing the care and treatment that women need to. The plans for the Mother and Baby Unit for South Wales are progressing very nicely, and there have also been some recent discussions with English colleagues around the provision for the rest of Wales. Last year, we were really busy. We rolled out lots of training to clinicians, and this year we hope to do the same, but obviously virtually. Some teams have also employed peer supporters, and others are working really closely with third sector organisations. The peer support role and the benefits of that are just, have been great. So we will be watching and seeing how that role develops across Wales.
Thanks, Sharon. And Sally, what does APP offer as support for women and families in pregnancy, in crisis, and in recovery?
So APP have lots of information about postpartum psychosis on our website, and that's for women, partners, families, and also health professionals. And so, there's information there, for example, for women that might be pregnant and are at risk of postpartum psychosis, so maybe they've had a previous postpartum psychosis before, or they have bipolar. There's also information for those that are in crisis and those recovering from postpartum psychosis as well. So lots of different information on the website. We've got some insider guides, so they're written by clinicians, academics, and also women and families with lived experience. So they're about recovery from PP, a partner's guide, and then for those who are at risk of developing postpartum psychosis as well. And they're just really nice information for people. We've also offer a variety of peer support. We've talked about it already, but through lots of different means. So we have one-to-one messaging, which I just found so useful in my recovery. We also have the online forum, where we have thousands of women and families that have been affected by postpartum psychosis can go on there and post about any topics related to postpartum psychosis. We have video calls and phone calls and cafe groups, and they're really kind of run by staff and trained volunteers and moderated, and they're a really nice, safe place for people to meet people that have been through postpartum psychosis as well. And like Ines, that was a massive part of my recovery, was meeting this network of lots of women and families that have been through the same thing. And I guess also we've just recently started the APP Facebook Partners group. So that's for partners that have been affected by postpartum psychosis. And we work closely with academics and clinicians just to make sure all our information is up to date and evidence-based as well. So yeah, lots of information there, and obviously get in contact with us if you need anything. And then health professional training as well, as Sharon has already mentioned as well. So.
Thank you. And Ines, I'd love to hear more about the South Wales and the North Wales peer support groups. Could you tell us about that, please?
Yeah, so the South Wales group, like I mentioned before, it was created about 1 year ago. It started as a face-to-face group, meeting in a cafe in Newport. And then we had to change it then to like a virtual group because of COVID. So we're now doing a monthly group via Zoom, and all of the ladies that used to come to the group, they attend now the virtual group. And then for North Wales, me and Sally have teamed up now to set up a peer support group in North Wales, because we felt that, it was a big area up there and which was no peer support available. Sally is busy training health professionals, but we felt that we are going to give it a go, and hopefully we'll have some women joining that. And we actually starting the first group tomorrow night.
Yeah, I guess just that it's an exciting time in Wales. Obviously, from a personal perspective, things have changed so much over the last 5 years from when I was poorly, and it's just a really exciting time. And I guess just for women and families to know that everyone's working really hard to make sure that families and women get the right support and treatment and get better from these illnesses, really.
So I'd like to round up by thanking Sally, Sharon and Ines for joining me. So thank you all.
Thank you for having us.
And just to say again that if you're worried that you are developing postpartum psychosis or someone that is close to you, then talk to health professionals, call your GP, or call 111 on the same day, or go to A&E or call 999 if you're worried. And you can get in touch with APP, and they can share lots of information about how they can help support you. So recovery is a difficult process, but you will get there, you will get better. You're not alone, and APP is a fantastic community of women with experience and experts who are here to help.